Welcome to the Genius Talk podcast. I'm your host Atul Raj from the bestemailmarketer.com, and today we have Doug C. Brown with us. Doug, thank you so much for joining.
Atul, thanks for having me here. Appreciate it.
Awesome, brother. Yep. Okay, so for our listeners who don't know you, can you tell them who you are and what do you do?
Sure. Well, I'm Doug C. Brown. The C is purposely there because Doug Brown is a professional hockey player and people confuse me all the time with him, but I can't skate to save my life. So we put the C in there. I always say the C stands for charming and to get a laugh out of people. I own a couple of companies. One is CEO Sales Strategies, where we are essentially growing the EBITDA of companies. In other words, growing the revenues, lowering the expenses, solving challenges within the company, streamlining processes and reducing stress. The ultimate outcome is we create more cash flow and we create a higher business valuation for companies. And I also own a software company called VIBITNO. And that is an automated proactive follow-up system for people because people drop the ball all the time on staying in touch with people.
Okay, so what inspired you to start CEO Sales Strategies?
Well, frankly, I've been doing this now for over 30 years. It all kind of started um, a little bit by error, quite frankly, Atul, because what ended up happening is I was just coaching people and I didn't even realize I was coaching people and they were getting me these amazing results in their business. And one day somebody said to me, "Hey, why don't I pay you for this and we'll meet on a regular basis?" And I did. And I was like, okay, well, that's kind of cool. And then other people said, yeah, I'll pay you too. And that's really how it was born, about 30 years ago.
Okay, so you work with Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes Company. So, what strategies made the biggest difference in boosting their conversion and closing rate?
Yeah, I mean, the the same strategies that I used for Chet Holmes and for Tony Robbins in their business where we, got amazing results. I was the independent president of sales and training at that time. The big secret here is I always look at metrics and I always look at math within the process. And that's what I was doing. I was going through every little single stage of their client journey, looking at the metrics, looking at the math, and then that was telling me a story. For example, they had a 15.3% refund rate on the front end of their initial offering. And I was like, wow, this initial offering is amazing. Why do we have 15% plus, right? Refunding. And so I looked at all the stages and then I listened to the recordings of the people who are actually doing the presentations on this. And what I discovered was they were actually inviting the refund. And so they were getting to a section and they were saying, hey, if we haven't earned our money today, just call 1-8, get a refund and you can get your money back on this. And I was like, man, everybody was saying this was amazing training for them until they got to that point, and then 15% of them were refunding. So I said, let's change the language and see what happens. And we went around the room and we collected, just as we did before, people saying, hey, how much money did you get out of this training today? Oh, I got $750,000. Oh, I got 7.6 million. I got $32 million, right? And all I did was change the line to test it, just as you would in any marketing, right? Or any messaging. And I changed the line from, hey, call 1-800, get a refund if we haven't earned our money today, to, well, I guess we've earned our money today, huh? We got 152,346,000,000, $1,000 on this call. Everybody agree? If so, go woohoo. And they all went woohoo. And the refund rate dropped to less than 1% within 24 hours. Now, if you think about it, if you're pushing 3,000 leads a week through this process, that's a lot of money that now goes back into the bank.
Mhm.
And it's also a lot of money that pushes forward in the funnel. So the next stage of somebody buying, now we had far more people moving to that next stage. And we knew that 1 out of 4 would buy on the next stage. And then we had another stage where 1 out of 5 was buying. So, that created literally millions and millions and millions, well, actually tens of millions of dollars over a period of time. So, I was using very straightforward techniques like that. But I look at data, I look at, the math and measure these things. And that tells the story. That's really kind of the secret behind the whole sauce. And most people don't do that. Like you look at follow up, for example,
Mhm.
half the people never follow up after a meeting, which is crazy. Right? You go to the meeting, person gives you, hey, let's get in touch. Half the people never do it. And so, you know, if you look at those metrics and you say, okay, I can fix this from half to 100% of the time people are following up,
Yeah.
all of a sudden new sales start sparking out and they're like, oh, well, this works. And it's like, of course it works. It's like, if you don't brush your teeth every day, you're going to have cavities. If you brush your teeth every day, you might have a few cavities, but you'll have less. And so it's a very similar philosophy. It sounds simple. It's a little more involved in that, but I mean, in reality, that's what it comes down to.
Mhm. Okay, so what did you learn selling across 300 plus industries?
That all people are the same and that all business is the same. It's money in, money out equals something. So money in, money out equals profit, loss, or break even. And every business on this planet is in the same business, but they think they're in a different business. The business they're in or should be in is client acquisition. Because if we can't acquire a client, we cannot sell our product or service. But when you talk to so many companies, it's like, well, what business you in? Oh, I'm in manufacturing. What business are you in? I'm in the audiovisual business. What business are you in? I'm a consultant. What business are you in? Automobiles, right? It's like no, 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 no. That's what you sell, but you've got to be in the business of client acquisition. So what does that mean? Marketing, ideal right fit buyer, sales, and clear messaging. That's the business you should be in, the majority of the business. And then once you solve that problem, then you've got other issues of, how to work on the business versus in the business to scale it. But it all comes down to that same formula. Money in, money out equals, it doesn't matter if I've worked with multi-billion-dollar companies. I've worked with, solo entrepreneurs. The other thing I learned is everybody has fears, wants, needs, and desires, and human beings, no matter where they are on this planet, literally the same. It's just we might have different cultures, might have backgrounds, a little bit of different value set, but not much. That's what I've learned.
Okay, so what are the most common mistake you see companies make when they are trying to grow their sales revenue?
That's a big question because it is a little bit depending on what stage they're in. It is a little bit different, but I would say overall, if we had to take a blanket and say overall, most companies are lacking in their the amount of outbound activity they're doing in order to hit their numbers. But I would say actually the number one, you asked me the number one, right? The number one challenge that most companies face is they don't know their truthful goal. They make this goal up and they say, "Hey, we're going to grow, quarter over quarter by I don't know, 12%." They pick a number, right? It's just and they pull the number out of the ether. It's like it's like there's no, you know, what was it? Simon Chinook, I think is his name. The why behind the 12%, right? There's no foundation behind that except it's a number and it's not a truthful number. It's like when companies set quota a lot of times, they're not setting the truthful number that they actually want. They figure quota is this. And if my salesperson hits, 80% of that number, then we're good. And so it's kind of a fictitious bar. And so what that tells me is why not set the real bar? Because if your salesperson has to hit quota, make them hit quota,
Mhm.
not 80%. Because then when you look at the 80%, when a new person comes in or other people are coming in, they're going, "Oh, I only have to do 80% of this. I don't have to do the actual quota." So if the real number is not 12%, say what it is. Maybe it's 10, right? And we're going to hit 10%. That way you can build a truthful plan, an accurate data backed, metrics backed, math backed plan to actually achieve that number. And hey, if we get to 12%, we got all this extra money. We can now do these other things and we can bonus people and we can get them involved in this or that. And we can do these special, depending on the size of the company, we'll send everybody on a vacation, right? I mean, whatever it is, the truthful goal is what I think messes most people up because, like, even if you talk to people that are, let's say, smaller companies or solo entrepreneurs, it's always the same thing, right? That when they start out, it's like, I want to make $100,000 a year, then I want to make 250, then I want to make 400 or 500, never six, seven. It's like, it's never 385. It's like, it's those two numbers. And then it jumps usually to $1 million. So there's no 600, 700, 800, $900,000 or any variant in between. It's like, it's $1 million. Right. And then so when I dig a little bit, I go, okay, well, why $1 million? And they say, well, because then I feel XYZ or whatever. That's cool. Listen, if you don't hit $1 million this year and you hit, 750, is that accept? That would be great. That's what they say. That'll be great. You know, well, and then I just back them down a little bit. What about 625? Well, that's a little bit less than I'd want, but I'd be accepting that too. And it's like, well, so it's not $1 million, right? And the way this came about, Atul, was I I one day I talked to a gentleman. He was doing $3 million a year, and he said he wanted to be a $54 million company in a year. And I asked him why. He didn't have a reason why. And I said, "Well, where's that number?" He goes, "I like it." I said, "Well, most people do." And I said, "Well, what do you have for a marketing budget? What do you have for growing a sales team budget?" And he goes, "Oh, we don't have really anything." I said, "Well, you're going to need $5 million." He goes, "We don't have $5 million." I said, "Well, then go borrow it, right? Because you're going to need that for what you're lifting off." And he goes, "No,
Mhm.
I'm not willing to do that." Okay, well, right? How are you going to hit your 54 million?
Exactly.
It's like, and that's where I think people, the number one thing really when it comes down to it is because if you don't have a truthful goal, you build a false plan off the goal that's not truthful. It's like hit 'em quota, we hit it 80%, we're good. And that's okay if that's how people wanna live, but it's really rough on projections and cash flow and how much money you're supposed to spend out or all of these factors. Remember, money in, money out equals something. So, yeah, that would be my answer on that one.
Okay, so you have built and led multiple sales teams on commission basis only. So, what advice do you have for motivating and retaining top performing salespeople long term?
Yeah, the thing is you don't have to motivate a sales team. If you have to keep motivating a sales team, you have the wrong people on your sales team. You want self-motivated people. So you test that on the way in. There are assessments who will test it. There are interview questions that can attest. But once they're in, human beings are human beings, right? I mean, we all like to, I don't know, once in a while just sit on the sofa and do nothing, right? Or take a few days off or whatever. There's nothing wrong with that as long as they're hitting their truthful numbers. But to keep them motivated, it's really about training and accountability. Training and accountability. And the third thing is praise. Salespeople by nature, many of them are wounded. They're wounded human beings from their childhood. And so many of them are driving forward. And the more they do, the better they feel about themselves. But I cannot tell you what the number is because I have never measured this number, but I should start going forward. What the ratio is of recognition on a regular basis. Like, when somebody has a big month, sometimes people go, "Oh, you did great." But on those weekly growth things that's going on, right? Somebody was making, let's say, cold calls is, the way they do it. And they were making 100 cold calls every single day. And the number they had to do was 80 every day, but they're doing 100 every day. No one comes by to them and goes, you know, Atul, you're amazing, right? Really appreciate you doing this, putting the extra effort in. They don't do that type of thing. They also don't hold them accountable and they don't measure the 100 cold calls. What they do is they look at the end of the month or whatever, and they start, on the third week of the month because the end of month is coming up, they start looking at numbers and they go, "Wow, oh man, we got to do this, we got to do that," or whatever. But if you did daily training, daily accountability, weekly praise, you'll motivate your sales team. And this, by the way, folks, if you have top producers, they want that too. If you know, like in many companies, there's always that, 2, 3 people out of the 20 people are just blazing the trail, right? They want the same thing. They want the accountability, they want the training, and they want the validation, the recognition, the praise. You don't need to buy them a new car every single month. What you really just need to do is walk by as a human being and go, you know what? I appreciate you doing this. And that will motivate people more, I have found, than almost anything.
Okay, so looking back when you started, what's one sales lesson you will tell yourself if you could restart today?
Always, I call it ABBR, ABAR. It's always be building a relationship. A lot of people in selling, they don't build relationships. They try to sell. And what I learned from building relationships is that the relationship capital that you build turns into a lot of good stuff later on. So there's two things I would tell my first self coming into selling. Percent of my time should be focused on selling. That means I should be 90% of my time in front of people talking to them. And that's a high number. If you can't achieve it, make it 80%. But the reality is the majority of my time should be spent doing one thing, making sales, having conversations. Through those conversations, you can extend other relationships. Some people call those referrals, right? Which, by the way, the majority of people don't ask for, right? But when you do the right thing and build a relationship, you have capital to go back on because your life changes. You might move from one sales position to another sales position. You might start your own company. And if you built a relationship, let's just say over, 5 years of selling for someone else and you decided to go build your own company, but you were networking and selling to people who actually had access to funds and capital and resources and things like that. And you really had a relationship with them. You can pick up, your cell phone or landline or, whatever and say, hey, I need a little bit of help. What do you think? And believe it or not, many people will help you. And maybe you need to hit a certain sales goal and you call up upon your network of relationships and you go, hey, you know what? I'm going for this sales goal here. I get a trip to, I don't know, Australia, whatever it is, right? And do you know any people that might want what I have? And believe it or not, you'll start hearing, yeah, let me look for a few names here and there, blah, 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 right? And if you had 50 people that gave you on average one name, that's 50 people you can call. And out of that, you will close a higher percentage than you will cold calling upon people or trying to build that relationship because the relationship capital is already transferred to you. So those two things, always be focused on selling 90% and two, always be building a relationship. I have relationships I have built literally 28 years ago that still, we're in contact on a monthly basis today.
Okay, so
Hence follow up a tool.
yeah, and yeah, you have a software which we can use to follow up. So
Yes,
can you talk about that?
sure. What would you like to know?
Okay, like is that like cold call follow up or it's email message? How does that works?
It's all of the above, right? So we have email, texting, phone follow up, even letters and all of that stuff. And the reason I actually built this thing is because early on in my career, painfully, I lost a $125,000 sale, and it was because I went on vacation. And I went on vacation. My oldest daughter, she was just a baby at the time. She became ill, and we brought her to the hospital, and they said she can't fly for 3 days. So, like, I called back my company I was working for. I said, "Hey, I can't make it." They're like, "Don't worry, you're the number one rep in this company. We'll take care of you. We'll cover all your email, all your phones, all your." Back then, we got a lot of snail mail. I come back 3 days later, my snail mail is jammed full, my email is at max capacity, and my phone could not take any more incoming messages, and on the phone, to abridge this story, there were lots of people calling me saying, "Hey, I'd like you to come on over and sign this contract with you." And one of them was a $125,000 sale. And I called him back and he goes, dude, where have you been? And I said, yeah, this is what happened. People were supposed to cover my calls. I didn't realize. He goes, oh, I'm so sorry. Your daughter okay? I said, yeah, she's good now. He said, cool. I said, well, I'll be right over. Now, I had been working on this deal for 4 months with this gentleman. So he knew me really well. And I said, yeah, I'll be right over. And he said, dude, I'm so sorry. I signed an agreement already. I said, when? He said, yesterday. I said, really? He goes, yeah, the CEO was pressing me to get this deal done. I said, well, we've been working on this for 4 months. Who'd you sign with? And he said, Lightbridge. And that was my number one competitor at the time. And I said, Lightbridge? When the heck were they in there? He goes, they cold called me 4 days ago. And so I had prepped this whole deal, and all Lightbridge did was make a call. And because he had to pull the trigger, Lightbridge walked in there, claimed $125,000 sale. Now, my commission on that sale was
Huh?
25,000 US dollars at the time. And that was way back then. It's probably something more like 45, 40, $45,000 today. And I said, never again, never again. So what I was doing is I created a whole paper setup. So I was following up because we didn't have any internet. We had internet, but we didn't have any there was no AI, there was no SaaS, barely anything around. Salesforce.com was just barely coming in at that point. So, over the years, I tracked this and we decided, you know what? This is still a rampant problem. You know, half the people don't follow up. 13% of people follow up 4 or more times on a cold sale. 8 to 22 contacts usually takes the case, right? But people just it's hard. It's hard to stay in touch with lots of people. So we solve that problem, and that's what we do. And the service is called Vibitno, Vibitno. You can get it at vibitno.com. And it's only invite only. So, it's not like something somebody can go up and buy. But, if they want to contact me, please do. And, we can have that conversation.
Okay, for our listeners who want to get some help from you and want to connect with you, where can they go?
The easiest, just send me an email at doug@ceosalesstrategies.com. That's Doug at ceosalesstrategies.com, plural on the sales and strategies. My LinkedIn is Doug Brown123. My phone number, 832-549-4836. Please, 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 no spam texts. But, those are the easiest ways to reach out to me. If you send me an email, I have a staff who watches my email, but I will certainly see it and respond personally to that after my staff does, most likely.
Okay, Doug, is there anything else that you would like to share?
I really appreciate this interview, Atul. I think, I get a pretty good read on people. You seem like an outstanding human being, in character and moral, it's one of those things that I appreciate being here. And I guess the last thing is if you learn something from this, now, look, I'm a trainer too, right? So if you learn something from this or anything, don't just listen to it one time, like really pull it apart and then study it because you will forget the majority of what we're talking about by tomorrow. It's just the way our brains work. It dumps out resources so it can bring it, it only has so much capacity, even though it has unlimited capacity. It only has so much short term memory, if you will. But without reinforcement, the skill set will drop off very quickly, the information. So, what I do with podcasts, and I recommend people do the same thing, you can transcribe it, download it, whatever, and actually study it because there are some nuggets of wisdom that came out of our conversation, Atul. Not because I'm arrogant, but because I know it is. And so that's what I would recommend people to do.
First of all, thank you so much for your compliment. And personally, here's how I study, okay? And I think it's a good way. So, first of all, first time when you're studying something, either it's a podcast or anything, interview, first time listen just to explore, okay? Just for as a sake of entertainment. And next time when go through it, listen and take notes and do that couple of times. And when you get feeling bored, then transcribe it, then start reading it, then you'll find more things.
Yeah. I mean, repetition, what I'm hearing is repetition, develops skill,
Yep.
and so what I'm hearing is you're doing multiple repetitions. So that makes total sense to me. If you think about it, this is how children learn. They don't get upset if they can't, well, sometimes they do, but most of the time, like, they're curious, they're trying to figure out, and this is why a child can pick up a, Android or iPhone and run circles around an adult because they're just they're not, like, taking it as, like, "What does this icon do? Oh, I can't make that work. Oh, my life is over," right? They're not thinking like that. They're just, like, curious. It's like, they got a butterfly in their hand and they're looking at it and they're going, how does this thing fly? What is it thinking? What does it eat? Right. And they're asking questions in their head, most likely. And so what they end up doing is discovering these amazing things that adults don't. I was just watching something to your credit on what you're saying. I was just watching something where in Atlanta, Georgia, there is a team who are high school students who have now developed a new technology on how to detect Lyme's disease. And if you don't know what that is, folks, it's from a tick bite, and actually how to actually cure Lyme's disease. And they are literally 15 years old. And they asked them the question, "How did you come up with this?" They said, "Well, we wanted to solve this problem, so we just kept going at it, reviewing it over and over and figuring out different angles over and over and over." So that's exactly what I heard you say, Atul. It's like you just go at it from different angles and repeating. And, they've done it. I was super impressed. So, go team down in Atlanta, right? But, this is a worldwide thing that countries are competing on this biotechnology and doing all these fantastic things. But, you know, to me, they're young individuals, right? Because I'm older now. But these people are 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old. So if they can do it, to your point, Atul, spend some time, invest some time, and you'll get a hell of a lot more out of this than you would if you just listened to this.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, I'm curious to know, you said like you won losses. Why don't you share your biggest win?
My biggest win?
Yep.
Well, my family, right? My kids and my wife. That's my biggest win. On a professional level? Wow, that's a great question. For me, the biggest win is impacting the actual human being more so than impacting the business. Like I've literally doubled, tripled, I mean, I had one client go from 7 million to 8.2 million in 3 weeks.
For 3 weeks.
Right? Yeah, in 3 weeks. Um, we took, a part of myself and a team, we took into it from they were losing $10 million a year on a $100 million division, and we got them to, $17 million swing to the positive, right, in 1 year. There's been, like, phenomenal stuff that happens where we have huge growth, but what I feel is a better win is when we can do that for companies, they don't fire people they were gonna fire because they now have the cash flow.
Hmm.
They invest back in their people. Someone is able to, do something with their family. Like, I just had a recent one, gentleman's name's Jonathan, and Jonathan is a solo consultant, and Jonathan took some of the information that we worked on and put it into play. And he went from $700,000 a year in his business to $920,000 a year in business in 6 weeks. He and his wife were always trying to buy a new home, but he wasn't able to really swing. He could have done it, but it was a lot of stress on him. But then when he went to 920,000, they bought that new home, right? So to me, he and his wife and his friends are hanging out at that house having a good time. To me, that is the success, right? Um, well, actually, my biggest success was this. One time I was talking to a business owner and he was super, super pushing back. I mean, he was like defiant in his pushback. And normally after a while, I like every human being, I'm like, okay, this is not something you want to do. I get it. All right. But this guy, something in my head just said, hang in with him." And we spent about 45 minutes or so on the phone. And finally at the end, he goes, "All right, fine. I'll do this." And he did. put his money forth, got to work, and about a year later, little longer than a year. So I had done mine with him, and then moved him off into other resources. And about a year later, I feel I'm at this live event. There's like 800 people there, and I feel this person come up and give me a hug, and then I feel two little hugs on my legs, and then another hug around the other side of my body. And I'm like, I look up, I go, "Oh, hey, how are you?" He goes, and I said, "What?" I knew he was doing pretty well now.
Mhm.
And he said to me, he goes, "Listen, there was something I didn't tell you on our first call." He's like, "My wife here and my kids, I was losing them. My wife and I were splitting up. My kids and I had hardly been seeing each other because of all the divorce thing that was going on. My business partner and I, we were actually $400,000 in debt I didn't tell you about that was being called on by the bank within the next 90 days." Like he just went on. He said, all of this stress was happening in my life. And he said, if it wasn't for you hanging in with me, basically showing me the mirror over and over and over again and inspiring me to take a chance, he said, I would have lost my family. I would have lost my business. He said, I don't know where I'd be right now, probably a drug addict in a gutter. But I want to thank you. And his wife said the same thing to me. I want to thank you. And the kids were holding on to my legs. And honestly, when they let go of me, I walked over in the corner. I started crying. I was like, oh my gosh, it's like, this is how what we do in life sometimes can impact people. And to me, that's the greatest win
Mhm.
because that changed that person's legacy and now their kids, instead of being without a daddy or, working with a stepdaddy or whatever, down the line, they have the family unit together. They were taking vacations, doing all that good stuff. And, to me, that changes legacies. So that's what it's about for me. The money is a byproduct of doing the right thing by people.
Exactly. Okay, Doug. Thank you so much for spending some time with us, and it was really fun chatting with you.
Thanks. I really appreciate you too, Atul. Thanks for having me on.